The galaxy is full of peace-loving civilizations, many of which seek to elevate others, to share their wisdom and enlightenment with species they deem primitive. When the Centauri, a highly advanced and peaceful alien species, set their sights on humanity, they saw only potential. They believed the humans were on the cusp of greatness, their violent history and chaotic nature only temporary hurdles. In their wisdom, the Centauri came to Earth with the intention of uplifting humanity into their image, a peaceful, intellectual race, capable of meditating on the mysteries of the universe and finding harmony within it. The Centauri introduced humanity to their ways, showing them new technologies, teaching them philosophy, ethics, and ways of thinking that transcended the petty conflicts that had plagued Earth for centuries. Their touch was gentle at first, nurturing humans with an offer of peace, unity, and the promise of transcendent wisdom. They set out to guide humanity down the same enlightened path they had walked, convinced that, given time, the humans would cast off their old ways and embrace a new, peaceful future. But the Centauri never expected that humanity's answer would be war. It started with subtle shifts. Humans, who had been shackled by their own internal conflicts for so long, began to embrace the Centauri's teachings not just as a spiritual awakening, but as a way to unlock their latent potential. But where the Centauri saw meditation and harmony, the humans saw an opportunity for power. Humanity's warriors, veterans of centuries of conflict and struggle, found that the Centauri's uplift wasn't just about enlightenment, it was about unlocking an inner strength, a focus, a drive for greatness. What the Centauri had meant to be a method of calming humanity's chaotic tendencies became the perfect training ground for the warriors humanity had always been, and the more they learned, the more they pushed back against the peaceful lessons they were taught. The Centauri didn't understand the change at first. Their minds were attuned to peace, not the raw fire of human aggression, but the humans were different. They adapted. They took the knowledge given to them and shaped it into something new, a battle philosophy that combined the Centauri's advanced techniques with human ingenuity. What had been intended as self-control and inner peace soon became a means of preparing for conflict, of rising to challenge any threat, and of becoming stronger than anyone ever imagined possible. At first, the Centauri were baffled. They had hoped to guide humanity into an enlightened age, but instead, they found that humans were using their teachings to sharpen their edges, to embrace their primal instincts. And as humanity's warriors grew more skilled, more disciplined, the Centauri were forced to confront a startling realization: they had created something they could no longer control. Humanity did not seek peace, nor did they wish for the serenity the Centauri had so carefully cultivated. They sought strength. They sought to dominate. They didn't just want to be uplifted, they wanted to be invincible. And they would fight for that invincibility, regardless of who stood in their way. The Centauri, for all their wisdom, had underestimated humanity's capacity for transformation. The humans began to turn the Centauri's peaceful philosophies on their head, merging them with their own rich history of warriors and soldiers, of fighters who had long honed their skills in the crucible of conflict. What the Centauri had designed as a peaceful ascension became an accelerated process of evolution. The humans were no longer just uplifted, they were transformed. They didn't stop with the Centauri's teachings. The humans integrated the knowledge of war, survival, and combat tactics from every corner of their past martial traditions, from Earth's ancient cultures, modern warfare strategies, and the innovations birthed from their many decades of violent history. The human race, once divided by countless conflicts, now stood united under one banner: to conquer, to dominate, and to evolve into the most fearsome force the galaxy had ever seen. The Centauri tried to intervene, tried to remind humanity of their peaceful destiny. But it was too late. Humanity had tasted the power of their newfound strength, and with each passing day, they became more formidable, more self-assured. They had not been uplifted into peaceful, enlightened beings. They had been uplifted into warriors, a new breed of warrior, imbued with ancient wisdom and unimaginable power. It wasn't long before humanity's influence spread far beyond Earth. Armed with both Centauri technology and their own unmatched adaptability, humans began to conquer, not through brute force alone, but with the cunning of a species that had been forged by conflict. They were no longer just a civilization on the brink of extinction, they were now a force to be reckoned with, a power to be feared. And all the while, the Centauri watched, helpless. They had come to uplift humanity, to show them a path of peace. Instead, humanity had turned that uplift into something else entirely, a path of strength, a warpath, and they were now leading the charge across the galaxy. The Centauri, once proud of their ability to guide and mentor, found themselves at the mercy of their own creation. The universe, it seemed, had underestimated humanity. What was once considered a flawed, chaotic species had now become an unstoppable juggernaut, a race of warriors, their fire never extinguished, their resolve unyielding. They had been uplifted by fire. And now, the fire would burn through the galaxy. The first sign of humanity's new presence in the galaxy came when the Centauri encountered the Vecna Alliance, a coalition of alien species that prided themselves on their technological prowess and peaceful coexistence. The alliance was built on the foundation of mutual respect and harmony between its members until humanity arrived. At first, the Vecna were intrigued, believing the humans to be another fledgling species with potential for enlightenment. They did not know that the fire in humanity's heart could not be quelled by peace alone. When the humans arrived in their fleet, sleek and powerful, bearing the strange mix of Centauri philosophy and human ferocity, the Vecna greeted them as they would any other species, tentative but hopeful. But it only took one encounter for the difference between the two to become clear. The humans were not interested in peace. They were not interested in mutual respect. They were interested in strength. Captain Eleanor Duval, once just a leader of human survivors, now found herself commanding one of humanity's finest warships, the Aegis. It was a marvel of human ingenuity, its sleek design enhanced by Centauri technology, its weapon systems honed by human instincts for combat. She stood on the bridge, watching as the Vecna ambassadors entered her ship. "I expected more," the Vecna ambassador said, scanning the human standing guard, their expressions calm but unreadable. "More peace. More cooperation." Duval's gaze was steady. "We are here to discuss the future of our species, not just for the sake of our own survival, but for the future of the galaxy. But we do it on our terms. Our survival isn't based on kindness or peaceful diplomacy, it's based on strength." The ambassador's expression faltered, and the silence between them deepened. The Vecna, with their vast knowledge of diplomacy and their serene, peaceful way of life, were unprepared for this new breed of humanity. It was a humanity not just bent on survival, but bent on dominance. "We do not seek conflict," the ambassador said, though there was a slight tremor in his voice. "And yet, conflict has found you," Duval replied, her tone unwavering. "We didn't come here to be lectured on peace. We came to show you what true power is, and why we will not stop until the galaxy knows our strength." The ambassador bristled. He had heard rumors of the humans, of their rise from the ashes of a brutal war against the Centauri. The stories were whispered in every corner of the galaxy, of humanity's rapid evolution from a chaotic, divided species to a unified, militant force. But no one truly believed it until now. The negotiations, if they could even be called that, ended abruptly when Duval's crew activated the Aegis weapon systems, subtly shifting the balance of power in the room. The message was clear: the humans had come, not as supplicants, but as conquerors. Within weeks, the Vecna Alliance realized the extent of their miscalculation. Humanity had not only adapted to Centauri teachings, they had made them their own, and then some. The peaceful wisdom of the Centauri had been twisted into something new, something far more dangerous. Where the Centauri had seen an enlightened species, the humans had seen opportunity. Opportunity to become stronger, to rise above, to never again be weak or divided. Humanity, in its new form, was a force of nature, a species that had embraced its destiny as warriors, fighters, and survivors. Word of humanity's rise spread like wildfire. The Vecna were not the only species to feel the brunt of it. Systems once thought unreachable by any race of humans were now within their grasp, territories long dominated by ancient powers now trembling at the sight of human ships on the horizon. And it wasn't just their firepower that drew attention, it was the way they fought. Humans fought with a burning passion that was infectious. They fought with purpose, with rage, and with a clarity that left no room for doubt. They would not be ignored, and they would not be stopped. The Centauri, in their naivety, had never anticipated that the fire they intended to temper would burn brighter than they could ever control. They had intended to guide humanity, to lift them toward peace and understanding. Instead, they had unintentionally shaped them into something entirely different, a species driven by the need to conquer, to forge their own path through the galaxy. The Centauri tried to send emissaries to the humans, to remind them of their origins and the principles of peaceful existence. But each time, their messages were ignored or worse, met with disdain. Duval stood on the bridge of the Aegis, her eyes fixed on the endless expanse of stars. There was no turning back now. They had been given the chance to rise, and they had taken it. No longer were they the fragile, fractured species that had once struggled against extinction. Now, they were a new breed, uplifted by fire, their very essence forged in conflict, unyielding and unbreakable. "Captain," Ortiz said, his voice low and filled with awe, "the Vecna fleet is retreating. They've sent a message they want to negotiate, to discuss terms." Duval's lips curved into a thin smile. "Terms? They want peace after everything they've seen? Let them try. We've given them a glimpse of what's to come." "And what comes next?" Ortiz asked, a hint of uncertainty creeping into his tone. "We've conquered so much. We've ascended, but what do we do now?" Duval turned to face her crew, her expression resolute. "Now, we show the galaxy what happens when you try to uplift humanity. We're not just survivors anymore. We're the fire. And the fire doesn't bow to anyone." The humans had evolved in ways no one had expected. Where the Centauri had sought to build a peaceful future, humanity had instead built an empire, a relentless, unstoppable force of warriors that would reshape the galaxy in their image. Their fire, once a flickering spark, had become an inferno. And the universe would have to learn to live with the consequences. Because, for humanity, the path to ascendancy had always been one of struggle. But they had learned how to wield it. And they would never be the same again. As the weeks passed, humanity's empire grew methodical, unstoppable. The galaxy, once a vast expanse of civilizations bound by treaties and peace, now trembled beneath the shadow of humanity's newly formed dominion. Each conquest, each victory, carried with it the fire of their unyielding will. The Centauri, despite their peace-driven nature, could no longer ignore the enormity of what they had inadvertently created. The message they had sought to deliver to humanity, that peace was the highest form of existence, had been rejected. Instead, humanity had embraced war as a means of ascension. And in this new galaxy, the rules had shifted irrevocably. The Centauri began to plot their next course of action. Despite their advanced technology and boundless wisdom, they were no match for the fire that humanity had unleashed. But they could not stand idly by. The Centauri had never been warriors, but they had other ways of engaging. They began assembling a coalition of their own lesser species who had long admired Centauri philosophy, but now found themselves caught between the two extremes of peace and war. But they were few in number, and their strength was far from the might of humanity's war-fueled power. Meanwhile, Duval's fleet grew stronger. Humanity had not only perfected the art of war, they had adapted to the galaxy itself. Their ships were more advanced, their soldiers more skilled. And with each victory, more races were either forced into submission or welcomed into the fold by the mere prospect of survival in a galaxy now dominated by humanity's indomitable force. The Aegis and her sister ships were the tip of the spear. They pierced through the heart of resistance with brutal efficiency. Duval had become a legend in her own right, a symbol of humanity's new age, embodying the fire that had brought them to this point. But there were still those who dared to oppose them. A faction of the Centauri, broken off from the peaceful majority, had begun to call for humanity's destruction and attempt to restore balance to the galaxy by eliminating the growing human threat. It wasn't just the Centauri who feared humanity's rise. A growing faction of the galaxy's older civilizations, the Eldrins, the Denak, and even the distant Zyrex, the ones who had survived through millennia of peace, began to whisper among themselves. They watched as the humans, seemingly unfazed by the threat of war, pressed forward, conquering star systems with military precision and unrelenting will. It wasn't just about victory for the humans anymore. It was about reshaping the galaxy according to their image. The galaxy, once a vast network of peaceful, intertwined cultures, now faced the looming reality that the humans had no intention of adhering to its rules. They had rejected peace, rejected the old ways, and instead, they had forged a new path, a path driven by strength, force, and a brutal clarity of purpose. As the Centauri and their allies tried to organize an opposition, Duval stood in the war room aboard the Aegis, studying a map of the galaxy. The stars blinked at her like silent witnesses to humanity's march. Her fingers traced over the lines of expansion, the borders of humanity's growing domain. No longer just a species on the brink of extinction, humanity now stood as a dominant force, a juggernaut that none could ignore. "Captain, the Centauri coalition is rallying in the Tyrus Nebula," Ortiz reported, his voice steady. "They've gathered a fleet, but it's smaller than ours. They've got advanced technology, but their numbers are low. They're readying for a stand." Duval's lips tightened into a smile, though her eyes were cold. "Let them come. They have one choice: yield or face the fire. We've done this before." But even as Duval spoke, a growing realization gnawed at the back of her mind. She knew that humanity's future wasn't merely about conquest. It wasn't just about conquering planets or wiping out entire fleets. The fire inside humanity burned with a purpose that none had anticipated, a purpose that had never truly been tested until now. As they moved toward the Tyrus Nebula, Duval gathered her senior officers in the briefing room. The tension was palpable. The entire galaxy watched as the human fleet prepared to face the Centauri's last-ditch effort to stop them. Every major power in the galaxy, from the most ancient of races to the youngest, was waiting for the outcome. But Duval knew something they didn't. This wasn't just a battle of fleets, it was a battle of ideologies. "Listen up," she began, her voice cutting through the room. "The Centauri think they can stop us by showing us the error of our ways. They think we're driven by a need to dominate, to conquer. But they're wrong. We don't need to dominate because we're trying to replace them. We're doing it because we've learned one thing that they can't teach us: the will to forge." She paused, her gaze sweeping over her officers, each one of them a product of the fire that had shaped humanity. "What we have, what we are, is not something that can be wiped out. Not by fleets, not by ideology. We forge our future. We forge ourselves. And when we face them as the masters of our own destiny." The officers nodded, each one steeling themselves for what was to come. They had seen the fire, felt it, lived it. Humanity had been forged in struggle, in blood, in loss, and in victory. Now, they would forge the future. The battle above the Tyrus Nebula was a brutal testament to humanity's transformation. The Centauri fleet, though smaller, came with their advanced weapons, relying on their peaceful technology to try and hold the humans back. But it quickly became clear that the Centauri's approach to war, built on restraint and tactical precision, was no match for the brutal, relentless aggression that humanity now wielded. Duval watched from the bridge of the Aegis, every nerve alive with the energy of the conflict. The ships fought like living creatures, darting through space, firing with deadly precision. But what struck her the most wasn't the battles themselves. It was the fact that, despite the Centauri's technological prowess, they were losing because humanity fought with something they had never understood: an unrelenting will. The Centauri tried to outmaneuver them, to use their advanced technology to block humanity's advance, but it wasn't enough. Humanity's fire was unstoppable. As the final blow was struck and the Centauri fleet was shattered, Duval stood at the front of the bridge, staring into the starry expanse ahead. She knew what this victory meant. It wasn't just a tactical win, it was a shift in the galaxy's balance. Humanity's fire had scorched the path forward, and now the universe would have to reckon with it. There was no peace waiting on the other side. No gentle uplift. Only the relentless forward march of humanity, driven by the fire that had been forged in their hearts. And the galaxy would either burn with them or be left in their wake. As the remnants of the Centauri fleet limped away into the depths of space, the human ships lingered, like predators over their fallen prey. The galaxy had watched in stunned silence as humanity's battle-hardened force overwhelmed the once proud Centauri. There was no fanfare, no cheering. Just a quiet, inevitable certainty that humanity's place in the stars had been sealed. In the wake of the battle, Duval stood on the command deck of the Aegis, her eyes cold and focused. The view of the nebula, now a graveyard of broken ships and silent debris, was almost serene. But beneath her calm exterior, there was a fire that still burned, a fire that could not be extinguished, not by victory, not by peace. "Captain," Ortiz's voice broke through the silence. "The remaining Centauri fleet has requested a parley. They've sent a representative from the Council. They're ready to negotiate terms of surrender." Duval turned slowly, her gaze intense. The fire in her eyes was not one of rage, but of clarity. Terms of surrender? After everything they've done? "I think they want to avoid complete annihilation," Ortiz said, his voice laced with caution. "Their fleet is scattered, and they're far from being able to pose any real threat." Duval took a deep breath. There was something strange about hearing the word surrender when it came from the Centauri. They had once thought themselves the guardians of peace, the ones who had tried to uplift humanity. Now, they were begging for mercy. She glanced at the star map displayed on the screen, the positions of their forces shifting, as if the very galaxy was realigning itself around humanity's newfound power. "Send the message," Duval said, her voice unwavering. "We will meet with their representative. But they should understand, no one gets to tell us how to live anymore. We make the rules now." The parley took place in the heart of the Aegis, a large, unadorned room that reflected the efficiency of the humans now in command. Duval sat at the head of the table, flanked by her most trusted officers, while the Centauri representative, a tall, slender being with silvery skin, sat opposite her. His eyes, filled with a strange mix of desperation and dignity, stared at her, but there was no warmth in them. "You understand what this means, Captain Duval," the Centauri representative said, his voice soft but firm. "Your victory is absolute. But the galaxy will not bend to your will without resistance. There will be others who challenge your path. The Zyrex, the Denak, the Eldrins, they will not bow. And without unity, even you will falter. The fire you have ignited will consume you, just as it has consumed us." Duval leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled in front of her lips as she studied him. "You misunderstand. The fire we've ignited isn't about consuming anyone, it's about becoming something else. Something no one can destroy." The Centauri shifted uneasily. "But you humans were always driven by chaos. What you've done is not ascension. It is a path to ruin. The fire you've sparked will eventually turn inward. And when it does, your species will burn itself to ash." A tense silence hung in the room as Duval regarded the Centauri with a hard, unblinking gaze. "You tried to lift us up into your vision of peace," she said, her voice cold and resolute. "And you were wrong. Humanity doesn't need peace to thrive. We need fire. We need the struggle. That's what makes us strong." The representative's lips parted as though to respond, but Duval held up a hand, stopping him. "I didn't come here to hear lectures about the path to ruin. You're right about one thing, there will be others who resist. And that's fine. Let them come. We'll meet them as we've met you head on, and we'll forge our place in the stars." The representative looked at her, his eyes searching for something, perhaps a sign of weakness or remorse. But Duval showed none. She was a new kind of leader, a product of humanity's evolution, shaped by fire, struggle, and victory. "You can leave now," Duval said, standing. "Tell your people we are not interested in their peace. We'll rule this galaxy, and we'll do it on our terms. Let them decide what side they want to be on. But don't come back to us asking for mercy. The Centauri bowed his head slightly, his shoulders sagging in resignation. The parley was over, and he knew there was no changing humanity's path now. As the Centauri representative left, Duval turned to face her officers, her face hardening into a mask of determination. "Prepare the fleet. We're moving to the next system." Ortiz raised an eyebrow, speaking up with a note of caution. "Are you sure, Captain? There are still factions out there, alliances that haven't faced us yet. It's not just the Centauri. The galaxy may be less than eager to bow to us. Even if we have the firepower, it won't be easy." Duval smiled, her eyes blazing with that same fire. "They'll either join us, or they'll burn with the rest of the universe. Humanity doesn't need their approval. We've spent too long waiting for a place at the table, and now the table is ours. We forge our future, no matter the cost." The orders were given. Humanity's warships, fleets vast and endless, began their march across the galaxy. The fire that had first been lit in the hearts of Earth's warriors now spread across countless worlds. The stars themselves seemed to bend toward the unstoppable march of humanity's forces. The galaxy, once a peaceful patchwork of interconnected civilizations, was now at the mercy of a species that had learned to forge itself into something greater than its past. The fire they wielded was not just the product of conflict, it was the very essence of what humanity had always been and would always become. Relentless, unyielding, unstoppable. And as they moved from system to system, conquering, shaping, and changing, they left a message in their wake: the fire is unstoppable. The universe would either learn to live with it or burn in its glow. As the fleets surged across the galaxy, the soundless hum of human ships reverberated through the vastness of space, signaling their unyielding march toward supremacy. Each system they conquered was etched in history, not as a tale of brutal domination, but as an undeniable truth: the fire of humanity's will could never be extinguished. The very fabric of the galaxy, once bound by treaties and delicate alliances, now faced a new force. And it was unstoppable. Duval stood at the helm of the Aegis once more, watching as the stars passed by in brilliant streaks. Her fleet had grown in strength, expanding not only through sheer power but through the alliances forged with those species who had come to understand the nature of humanity's rise. The Zyrex, once skeptical, had bowed to humanity's might and joined the ranks. The Denak, too, had seen the writing on the wall and accepted the new order, wary but willing to survive. Even the Eldrins, the ancient race that had once considered themselves the keepers of wisdom, had started sending emissaries, albeit with hesitation. But not all had bent the knee. There were still factions that refused to accept humanity's place at the top of the galactic hierarchy. The remnants of the Centauri, those who had never embraced humanity's vision, sought refuge in the far reaches of the galaxy, gathering allies to form a resistance. They were a splintered force, their numbers dwindling, but they still had a formidable fleet and a few powerful allies. As humanity advanced further into their domain, the first of the great resistances made their move. The Zalorth Collective, a powerful alliance of enigmatic species known for their mastery of telepathic warfare, had always viewed humanity's rise as a threat to their way of life. Their connection to the stars and their manipulation of the energy that flowed through the galaxy gave them unique abilities, but also a crippling arrogance. The Zalorth were not a race to be swayed by mere force, and they believed that only the mentally and spiritually enlightened could hold true dominion over the galaxy. Duval had heard whispers of the Zalorth's growing influence, their efforts to rally the remaining powers in the galaxy against humanity's relentless advance. Their final stand would come soon, and she knew it would be a battle unlike any they had fought before. It would be a clash of minds and might, of strength versus the intangible. Humanity's fire had ignited a new reality, but the Zalorth were determined to see it quenched by their own brand of ancient wisdom. The Zalorth made their move at the fringe of the Zalaris system. It was a barren, isolated system, nothing more than a few gas giants and frozen moons, but for the Zalorth, it was the perfect battleground. They had cloaked their fleet in the nebula's dust, preparing for an ambush, using their psychic abilities to weave a false image of weakness in humanity's forces. Duval received the reports as they came in. The Aegis was the first to detect the subtle psychic interference in the system. The crew's sensors were almost drowned by the Zalorth's ability to distort perception, making it difficult to track their ships. "Captain," Ortiz said, his voice laced with urgency, "the fleet's being scrambled. We can't get a proper read on their numbers. They've deployed psychic barriers, our scans are all over the place." Duval's eyes narrowed. She knew the Zalorth would never meet humanity in the open, where their might could be tested. Instead, they would use deception, trickery, and manipulation. But humanity had learned to adapt. "Activate the countermeasures," Duval commanded. "We may not be able to block their psychic interference directly, but we can overwhelm their senses with a storm of data. I want them to see the fire. I want them to feel it. Let's give them a taste of their own medicine." The crew sprang into action, their training kicking in with practiced ease. Humanity's response to psychic warfare had never been about defending against it. Instead, it was about redirecting its force, turning it back on the attackers. As the Zalorth's psychic barriers tried to cloak their fleet, the humans countered with an onslaught of electromagnetic pulses, disorienting their enemies and amplifying their own presence in the mental and physical plane. Suddenly, the silence of the system was shattered as the Zalorth fleet emerged from the Nebula Dreadnought-class ships, massive and imposing, their edges sharp like blades of light. They had relied on their psychic prowess for too long, and now they found themselves facing an enemy that refused to bend, that fought back with everything they had. The battle was fierce, unlike anything the Zalorth had anticipated. For every psychic barrier they raised, humanity's fire fueled by anger, determination, and a deep, unyielding need to survive pierced through it. The human ships moved with an almost instinctual coordination, fighting not just as soldiers, but as an embodiment of their will. Duval stood at the helm, her fingers clenched into fists as the enemy ships loomed large in the viewports. Her voice rang out across the command deck. "We're not here to conquer their minds. We're here to show them that the fire we carry is far more powerful than any illusion." The Aegis surged forward, cutting through the Zalorth's psychic barriers like a blade through paper. The battle stretched on for hours, both sides hurling everything they had at each other, but in the end, humanity's ferocity won out. The Zalorth fleet, once an impenetrable wall of psychic energy, faltered under the pressure of unrelenting attack, unable to match the sheer force of will that humanity brought to the table. As the last of the Zalorth ships fell silent, Duval stood before her officers, her face unreadable. "We have proven our strength," she said, her voice steady. "But the war is far from over. The galaxy will resist. It will fight. And we will forge our future against that resistance. It is not about the end of the battle, but the fire we carry forward." The crew nodded, their resolve strengthened. Humanity's fire had already claimed a place in the galaxy, but its true strength lay in its ability to grow, to adapt, and to continue its forward march, regardless of the forces that would rise against it. Back in the heart of the galaxy, the remaining factions, those that had hoped to see humanity burn out, began to reevaluate. The Zalorth's defeat sent ripples throughout the galaxy, a clear message that humanity's rise was unstoppable. The galaxy was no longer a peaceful coalition of species trying to coexist. It was a battlefield, one where only the strongest would survive. And humanity, with its fire and unbreakable will, had become the flame that would forge the future. Duval stood before her fleet, looking out at the stars once more. The fire of humanity had begun to consume the galaxy, not with destruction, but with the undeniable certainty that they would never again be the weak, fractured species they once were. They were now the force that would shape the galaxy into something entirely new. And they would stop at nothing until they were the galaxy's true rulers, not by peace, but by strength.